and welcome to Film 253 Narration in Digital Age. We are going to talk about three-act structure. To make it simple, a good script is usually known to be composed in three parts: beginning, middle, and end. Act 1 is a way of introducing your audience into the story world of the film. It usually begins with an establishing shot, introducing the characters, location. You're going to see the ordinary life of the hero in the setting. How was his life before the action begins? So, a sufficient background information should be given at this act. Other major characters should be introduced, but slowly to avoid confusion. So, we are going to be prepared for Act 2. Maybe two-thirds of the movie is taking place in Act 2. That's the action, the main line of actions happening in the Act 2. At this time, the protagonist is going to face obstacles, and that causes conflicts that changes the life of the protagonist. It is in Act 2 that we have the climaxes of the film and main confrontations, maybe, and usually a resolution in the Act 3. For example, a horror movie Get Out is a good example of a movie that respects three-act structure. The first part of the movie is very realistic. It's just introducing us to the characters, no indications of scary scenes. And you're going to see a family that looks very healthy. However, it is in the first act that you're going to receive the clues. The first thought and the second thought. Something uncanny is going on, and it's going to be revealed in a couple of scenes. For example, when the servant is looking at him with an uncanny and to some degree even scary facial expression. At this point, we realize that there's something wrong, and we are going to be prepared that there is going to be a conflict between these two characters, for example. The next part of Get Out is just the actions, Act 2. We have all those scary scenes and the action scenes, and also the conflicts that are getting worse and worse. The hero cannot get out, and at the end, there is some sort of resolution. He's arrested, but he has stopped the family to do more evil things to other people. Stylistically speaking, you have more realist look in the beginning of the movies. In Act One, usually it happens in daylights, wider shots. Sometimes they use voiceover narration to realistically explain it's happening at what time, what location, and what sort of behaviors you're going to expect from the major characters. For example, a movie like Casablanca is known for the use of expressionistic lighting, very formalist approach to the use of shadows and light in certain scenes, the kind of noir lighting. But if you actually see the movie, that the first act is taking place in the daylight, explaining the city of Casablanca. So after a lengthy newsreel scene that explains the historical situation, what is Morocco in Second World War, and then we're going to introduce in these scenes in daylights, very crowded. Major characters are not introduced, nothing psychological, none of that sort of anti-realist approach to lighting is present in this opening scene. It's just introducing us to the situation.
I don't think I have them on me.
In that case, we'll have to ask you to come along.
Wait, it's possible that, yes. Here we are.
These papers expired 3 weeks ago. You'll have to come along. Halt! Halt!
However, in the Act 2, the scenes are becoming very expressionistic because it's about the internal reluctancy of the hero to be part of these acts. That is why in the second act, there's less realism and more expressionistic style being used. However, if we look at the transition to the flashback sequence, we're going to see that again there is more realism because the scene is supposed to explain the current situation, gives us some sort of a background. So again, wider shot, daytime lighting, and so in some movies, the ending is going back to realist portrayal. Sometimes, like this scene in Casablanca, it's giving us still a foggy, surreal image. It's different than the Act One and the Act Two. Is the style for the final act. It is in Act Two that usually the directors, because they have more time, introduce subplots that they eventually is supposed to support again the main line of actions in the plot line. Almost all Hollywood movies follow the same structure, but that doesn't mean that art movies do not follow or do not use three acts structures. If you've seen a movie such as Bicycle Thieves, for example, it's the same thing. It's introduced, we are introduced to the current situation, the family business of the protagonist, and then we see the conflict. He cannot find a job because his bicycle is stolen. So this is the time that we see the actions, and at the end, um, although there is no single resolutions, but it's the time that we can see his son, the hero's son, is coming to understand his father, is acceptance and forgiveness, although his father has done something bad, but because of the course of the action, the son is now understanding his father. So even films like of Italian neorealism, films of Kiarostami, they still follow that line of thought. They still think about the plot in three acts. Although there is no professional actors or famous stars in this film. Why is this important? Why three acts structure works? One reason is that writing for a movie is different than writing for a novel. A movie is a very temporal medium, and also it's limited to something like 90 minutes, 2 hours, and something. So it should be structured. Also, in movies, we don't have narrators like novels that would explain to us everything. We know that everything should be introduced through the behavior of the characters and the visual style of the film, the mise en scène. So, for that reason, certain conflicts should be introduced at certain time. And a good script is always changing the nature of that conflict for the viewers. There are also generic chronotopes and expectations with regards to the generic formula of the film. For example, in Western films, usually we are introduced to the Wild West, then we are introduced to the problem of the town and the fact that there is a need for the hero to come to the town and restore peace and order. The hero comes into the town and we have initial conflicts. Usually happens in a bar. Nobody's getting hurt, but we realized who's with who are the good characters, who are the bad characters. That quick expressions of violence is taking place in Act One, together with other scenes in other places. For example, usually the protagonist, the cowboy, is going to the town's barber shop, and in that place, you hear gossips. Again, certain informations about other characters and what's going on and why people are silent, they're not brave enough to speak up is revealed to us at that point. Then we have Act Two, actual confrontations of good cowboys versus bad guys. And this one is not taking place inside the towns like a barber shop or a bar, but is taking place, for example, in a mountain. And At this point, we sometimes are introduced to the indigenous characters. So the conflict is becoming bigger and bigger. At the end, peace is restored in town. The revenge was successful, and the good protagonist or hero is leaving the town after doing what was supposed to be done. Similar things happen in romantic comedies. For example, we see that like in the beginning, there's a history between the main couples, and then during the action scenes, they are with wrong couples, and for that reason, they cannot get together because apparently they are with someone else. However, it is at the end that usually through a happy ending, the resolution happens and the main couples are getting together. So for this course, we're going to see Bill Wilder's Apartment as an example of a movie that follows three-act structure perfectly, but it's also a very complex film in terms of its approach to narration. There are a number of different subplots and climaxes within each act. Also, please look at the film's use of cinematography and mise en scène, how they support the main storyline, main plot lines. If the camera is filming something, why it's filming something? Because at some point in the story, it's going to be used to further develop the plot line and the storyline.